I'm Senator John McCain. I was a prisoner of war in Vietnam from 1967 until 1973. The following program, the product of a special topics course conducted by the students of Cuyahoga Community College, focuses on a topic with which I am familiar. It is an oral history, preserved for future generations, of the prisoner of war experience. I was honored to be asked to provide some introductory comments for the program that you are about to see. It serves to honor individuals who persevered through terrible adversity and emerged with dignity and a renewed sense of patriotism, known only to those who have lost their freedom in its defense. For the thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who experienced the loss of something too many take for granted, their freedom, and for the families at home waiting and praying for the return of their loved ones, the students of Cuyahoga Community College who participated in this production have performed an invaluable service and appreciation. Barbed Wire Brotherhood is a testament to the struggle to survive with dignity, captivity under the harsh conditions. It is a film that deserves to be seen by all Americans.
This could be a bingo club, a senior citizen Sunday lunch group, or a grandparent social. These very ordinary looking people, retired from very ordinary jobs, and very ordinary in appearance, are anything but ordinary. They share a common bond and proudly wear the badge that distinguishes them as veterans, part of the greatest generation of the 20th century. Like most veterans, they have experienced the horrors of combat and their battle scars cut deep, forging a special bond. Their courage and their will to survive has established an enduring brotherhood.
Guten Morgen, Sergeants. Nasty weather we are having, eh? And I so much hoped we could give you a white Christmas, just like the ones you used to know.
The experience of combat is terrifying. The fury of battle triggers a wide range of emotions. The soldier is part of a team. There's an esprit de corps, and nationalism unites. There is, however, an even more dangerous period in combat: capture. When a soldier no longer is able to continue the fight. At the moment of capture, he is at the mercy of those he has been trying to kill.
I learned that whenever you're going somewhere to kick butts, you have to be very careful because you're taking a butt with you that might get kicked. And that's what happened to me. The right wing was ripped. I saw the perforation. The plane flipped over, upside down, 400 miles an hour, headed toward the ground, about 200 feet off the ground.
I heard from our lieutenant, our CO, holler to us, "Come on out, you guys, they know you're in there." So I said, turned around to the sergeant, I said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Throw down your weapons." And that's how it happened. I didn't come out with a white flag or anything like that. I was ordered to surrender. And it was very fortunate that this happened, because when I went by this German soldier, he had what we call a potato masher. It's a big hand grenade, and he had just ready to toss it in.
As I got near the ground, I was coming down a lot faster than I thought I would, and I got a little bit panicky, and I put my hands up on the shroud lines to kind of steer the chute, and there was a guy running across the field with a gun in his hand pointed at my head that looked as big as a cannon. And I didn't know if he was going to shoot or not. So at that precise moment, I hit the ground and broke my left foot. And the pain was so intense it went right up through the top of my skull.
And I could see the plane was just below me. The plane spiraled into the ground, and I was coming down right on top of it. And the plane then exploded and blew me away, fortunately. And I landed in a farmer's field. There was a 40-mile-an-hour crosswind blowing that day. So besides the speed coming down in the parachute, we were being pushed along the ground at 40 miles an hour, and I hit the ground and tore up my shoulder and tore up my back. I looked around, gathered up my chute, and I could see some people coming across the field. And for a minute I thought, well, maybe these are the Germans that have been hiding some of our airmen who get shot down over Germany. But it wasn't. It was what they called the Landwehr, the land army.
When we bailed out, I landed. I had my chute ducked, and I was in a ditch. I should have stayed there. But I lifted my head up, and all of a sudden, a wham, it really shot it over my head. So I knew, so I just surrendered. And they took us to a dungeon in Lille, France. That's where we landed, in Lille. The dungeon was like one of those old bastilles that you see in some of these old movies.
And at this moment, I was lying on the ground, and I could see through the legs of the soldier this German Hausfrau coming with a white starched apron, and she was coming like a destroyer through a heavy swell in the ocean. And she cut right up to me, pushed the fellows aside, and she walked up to me and touched my body with her shoes, and she spat on me twice, and she says, "Chicago gangster," called me that twice. So I knew now that I had arrived in Nazi Germany.
Something said, boom! I look up and there's a hole on top of the canopy. Fire came up out of the floor. The darn shell came up right in front of me and went out to the top.
When I started trying to get up, I realized my shoulder was broken, a compound fracture, and I passed out again. I passed out because my neck was also broken. 3, 4, 5, and 6 had been broken into a lot of little pieces, but all of that I didn't know. All I knew was that I was out unconscious again. When I regained consciousness, the Germans were standing over me, 3 of them with machine pistols. Rausmitten! I didn't have any problem understanding that meant get the hell up on your feet.
You pull that sucker up anyway, and as you're going up, you reach up on the instrument panel and pull that little red knob, and the canopy will. And I don't know how high I got. I made 1,000 feet, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I had to get out. Turn the stick loose. When you turn the stick loose, the nose would pop. At the same time, you had straps across the top, straps around the bottom, and you hit the buckle. When they came loose, well, the nose popped. When they hit, I came out. And I remember the tail going by with all that fire, reach and pull the D-ring, and say to myself, usually I say, you count 1, 2, 3, and pull it. Heck no, I had to pull that son of a gun. As soon as I saw the tail go by, I pulled the D-ring. Somebody stole the silk. There was a rumor. Some character was taking the silk out of the parachutes, selling the silk to the Italians, stuffing the damn thing with paper. I'm looking at, oh hell, like, bang! The parachute popped, and when it popped, I'm in the trees. And the Germans are right over there, right around me. Number 1 and number 3 got through. When they looked back, they saw my plane go in. Didn't see me get out.
To be captured by the Japanese was the worst of all torments. Japan did not sign the 1929 Geneva Convention. This fact, and the cult of Bushido, explains the high mortality rate of those captured by the Japanese.
When we surrendered on the 23rd of December, the Japanese took over. The first thing they did to us was had us take all our clothes off. We were stark raving naked, wired our hands behind our back and up around our neck. They got us all together at the end of the runway at the airstrip there, and hell, we didn't know what they were going to do. We didn't know whether they were going to kill us all or what. But the day before Christmas, when we thought it was all over with, their interpreter come running down the road, and I'll never forget it, hollering, "Mate, mate, mate." Japanese, this is wait, wait, wait. And apparently they were ready to do what they had to do, and he just stopped them.
As a prisoner of war, the GI entered a world of chaos and isolation. In his book, Voices of Captivity, author Robert Doyle noted that the main objective of any captive is to survive by avoiding the captor's attention. The added burden of guilt and shame are part of the psychological baggage that a POW carries forever. It is summarized as barbed wire psychosis.
I was put in a barracks this time in a room. There's supposed to be 16 men in that room, and there were 32. So half of us had to sleep on the floor, but what we used to do would pile blankets on the floor, and then we'd all sleep on the blankets and then put other blankets over us, but everybody had to turn over at the same time, or there was trouble, you know. And of course it was so cold because we had no real heat that we had to, it would keep our clothes on to stay warm.
In October of 43, we went to Stalag 17, and I stayed there for 18 months. There we lived in a barracks, no heat all winter long, never took my clothes off. I had for friends lice, fleas, and mice to keep warm.
For all prisoners, and in all wars, food is a universal obsession. Food is linked to life.
We had nothing. We had 4 big steam kettles in the kitchen area, and we had hot water in the mornings. We'd get watery soup, possibly. They brought in bread stacked in trucks or wagons like bricks, and it was just about the same consistency.
The kind of food we had, maybe we'd get a bowl of soup a day, and we got some maggots in it. We were very happy because we got some protein that way. And we would get some of this bread that was filled with sawdust to give it some body. And occasionally, I remember a cheese factory got bombed out and burned down, so we got some burned cheese from this cheese factory. And the thing that we got a lot of was Kartoffeln, potatoes. Apparently, everyone in Germany grows potatoes.
Red Cross parcels become crucial to survival. Many Americans would have died without those precious parcels.
The food that we were given by the Germans was not really adequate. When indeed the Red Cross could get through, we received Red Cross parcels, and they were enough to really keep us going. And plus the Red Cross parcels themselves established a kind of a value. The chocolate bar, the D bar, was a measure of what something was worth, or maybe if you wanted to break it down into smaller units, why the number of cigarettes something was worth. And that was our measure to trade back and forth amongst each other, and in a way that we could, in fact, if the Germans were up to it, trade with the Germans to help our living conditions.
Thank God I didn't smoke, and I used cigarettes for trading in Munich. We trade 5 cigarettes for a kilo of bread, but we always kept the price at 5 cigarettes for a kilo of bread. My God, we're not going to change that price.
The stress of captivity, when combined with the unknown duration of imprisonment, compound the psychological trauma of the prisoner's ordeal. Capture is equated with failure.
But there was one terrible thing. We had a guard there, and I can't remember his name, but he was I was pretty well protected from him. My crew stayed around me pretty much all the time, and I was pretty well protected from any of the violence that went on, but I saw it. He would kill kids there, guys there. He would shoot them. He would torture them. And I wish I could remember his name, but he was an awful individual. And later on that 87-day Black March from Stalag Luft 4 back and forth across Germany, I know the ex-prisoners of war, so I won't say who they are because I think you know them too. But on that march, they caught him and cut his head off.
The Russian artillery was getting closer and closer, so they suddenly marched us out of Stalag Luft 3, sometime maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, through a raging blizzard. And I think everyone on that march got frozen feet, numb hands and what have you. It was very, very cold. And we marched, for at least 24 hours till we got to some barn. Now eventually we ended up in Stalag 13D in Nuremberg.
We were marched, and we were marched probably to go get, so the Germans would be surrendering to the Americans. And on our way, when we got to Linz, Austria, we were by Mulhausen prison camp. That was probably one of the worst concentration camps in Europe. And they told us to get on the side of the road. So we went on the side of the road, and out of the gates, they start marching these civilians and Jewish prisoners. And some of them looked like walking skeletons. And as they were walking, if they couldn't make it and they fell, the German would come along and either hit them over the head with the butt of the rifle or put a bullet in their head. There was many of them laying on the ground dead. Then after they marched them out, we got up and we had to walk over their bodies to continue our march. And it was probably one of the most horrible scenes I've ever seen in my life. It's something that's lived with me all the rest of my days. I still remember it.
I know that we did get some amputees came in were stationed or lodged with us for a while before they were being repatriated. And I used to watch these guys jumping around the base, playing baseball on one leg and with one arm playing catch. And in fact, 2 amputees, each had lost an arm, used to play the guitar. One guy would strum and the other one would finger. You know.
We had a lot of tough times, but thank God we had a sense of humor. Many times we could laugh at the things that happened to us, and we'd kid about the lice we'd have and the fleas, and we'd kid about how grubby we were, and someday we're gonna laugh at all this, but thank God for our sense of humor.
Japanese guards were universally harsh and often barbaric. The Bushido warrior code is deeply etched in the Japanese soldier. The Japanese army posted its rules of behavior for captives.
This is where they'd get us out about 2 o'clock in the morning, line us all up, and they would call 3 men and call them up, and they charge them with different things. And the worst thing you could do over there at that time was to trade with the Koreans, and then they'd just start beating on you. The first time this happened, and it was bad, but the second time they called us out, they called what I call it the Frenchman that got up first. They charged him with it, and they started beating on him. And they beat him, and he passed out. They threw water on him. They beat him on him. And by this time, crap was running down his legs and everything. And again, they brought him back to it, and they beat him. He died 2 days later. I was the second guy called. My number was 360. Sunbuck RookachQ. That was my name. And they called my name. And I think I was ready to pass out. And there was one Jap sailor there. It was old. He had to be almost in his 60s. Walked over to me and he stuck his finger in my nose and he said, "Okay, Nopo. Now you got it, Nopo." No, he said, "Well, I think I might have even started to cry. I don't know, but I would have died if they'd have called me up there." And he said, "Well, wait, mate, wait a minute." So he went up and he talked to the Igawa Heso. He came back and he says, "Get back in the Mofus with Mofus blankets. Get back to Mofus." He saved my life. I couldn't have survived that. The death march.
They started moving us out in large groups, maybe 500 in a group, maybe several hundred in a group, and that's when the death march started. And we started turned out to be a 65-mile walk.
Prison life is for an animal. The kids today don't know what war is. I hope they never have to see it.
When at last liberation happens, there is, of course, relief, joy, and gratitude. But ironically, a dualism of both joy and sorrow engulf the liberated GI.
Like a 3-story building, and we were in there a short time, and the artillery started down below in the valley, and you could look down through the window and see these huge trees almost being ripped up. And here I was that was our artillery, and I was still on the wrong side. So I had some moments there of frustration, you might say. Then later, that same afternoon, there was a couple of pops down the hallway, and a Free French man ran in there like a civilian with a pistol. And he motioned me to go with him. So he was with the Free French Army. And he wanted to know if I could chauffeur. And I said, sure. But outside of that, I didn't understand much French. And we went down, and they put me in a Ford truck, you might say, with a big red cross on it. And he gave me a guide. And in the meantime, the rest of the hospital was like, you might say, the Free French made a raid on it. And there was at least 8 of us. Some of them were aviators in the back of the truck. And we took off with this guide. And I finally got back to the American lines and was put in a repo depot. And I think they forgot about me because I must have been there a couple of months.
Coincidentally, the same troops that we cleared the French coast to land, George Patton's group, was the group that came through Munich and liberated us from prisoner of war camp. We were liberated on the 29th of April. The war wasn't over until the 9th of May, so we were free before then. Patton liberated us, and he was in the 3rd tank. It's pretty easy to fight for a guy who doesn't say, go get them, but says, come on, let's get them. I can see why he was such a great general.
We knew that it was coming soon. Every day, the artillery got louder, and at night, the flashes in the sky got brighter, and they kept coming and coming, and then we noticed that there were more guards taking off. And so I think it was a Sunday, I'm not positive. But we were we were outside for some reason or other, and all of a sudden we heard the small arms fire, rifle and machine guns, not any of the heavy stuff. And we all just kind of hit the dirt, you know, we're not going to get killed now at this late stage. Then all of a sudden, boom, the gates come flying open, and it was Patton's 4th Armored Division that came in that liberated us.
April 29, 1945, Patton's Third Army liberated us from Solid 7A in Mooseburg. And we were then taken under American command, where we suddenly started to get some food that we could digest. And in a couple of weeks, in about a week or so, I should say, we were sent to an airfield where we were airlifted to Camp Lucky Strike.
We knew it was imminent that they would be rescuing us, and the next morning there was a detachment from the American 13th Armored Division of General Patton's Third Army that came up and announced that we were free, that we were under their jurisdiction now, and their guards got kicked around for a change. This sounds goofy, but I mean that's the way war is, and I was a little bit shocked at that, because I wasn't expecting to see Americans raising heck and kicking them around and knocking them around with gun butts and things like that, but I didn't see that kind of combat. Ours was sort of different, and I can understand why it was. But the shoe was on the other foot.
We went to bed one night and woke up the next day surrounded by Russians, and Germans had just taken off. And these Russians were mostly women army. And you know, there's no distinction about women and men in the Russian army. They all are in the same barracks and everything, you know. And they were driving American-made tanks. And they were rough. And when they asked me to have a drink of vodka, I had it. Even though it came right back up, I had it. That was something. I refused to do anything they didn't want me to do, and I didn't disobey them one bit.
The Russians, we were in Camp 3A, I was, and the Russians came in with their tanks, knocked down the fences, and they had women cavalry. They had their sabers out chasing German guards around, doing away with those people. And then the Russians wanted to keep us and send us back through Odessa and the Black Sea and charge the government $1 a head. Well, we were more afraid of the Russians than we were the Germans, because they were pretty barbaric. And we got in contact with our lines, and they sent up some trucks, and we escaped that way from the Russians.
Before long, we were all outside. If we see these guards, all of a sudden, they take off their caps, take off their rifle, and throw everything in the ground. It disappeared. There was nobody there. And then we saw the tanks coming down the main road of we knew we were liberated.
They drove across the bridge where we had across the river, right up into the camp and through the fence and all. And a nice young major jumped out of the lead tank, and the boys grabbed him up and started kissing and hugging him. He was not ready for that, but after the years that they were confined, they kind of appreciated what they did.
Finally, some B-17s just came into the airport, and they rushed us over there, put us on B-17s. They just one right after the other flew us to Camp Lucky Strike in France. Actually, we flew us to Lyon, and then we went to Camp Lucky Strike to fatten us up because they wouldn't let us come home then.
The day after liberation, we were walking along, me and another fellow, and we met this German there, walking too. And I went up to him and I asked him for his stuff, and he surrendered. His camera, his saber, his hat, and his gun. He gave it to me. And with this camera, I was able to take, I don't know how many pictures, 30 or 40 pictures of fellow prisoners that were in Stalag 17.
I rode down to the camp at Dachau, just outside of Munich. And everything that the Jews say about what happened had to happen because the stench was such that you could smell it before you got there. And when you got there and saw the rubble with bones and things in there, you could wonder how any civilized human being could treat another the way that we saw the ashes and stuff from there.
The Japanese commandant or commander, whatever you want to call him, was standing on like a little bit of a podium, and he told us that he had good news for us. The war was over, and we were all going home, and that he had tried to do what was right, but that was there's only certain things he could do. With that, he left. They turned the guns and that and rifles and that over to us. In our camp, the ranking officer was an English wing commander. He took the guns, gave them to English soldiers, and posted them in the guards. Nobody was going to leave that camp. Well, about this time, one of the first things we had to do was that we had to mark our camp with a big PW on the roof. So, and our Air Force at that time, instead of bombing, was now loading those B-29s with 55-gallon drums of food and supplies, which they tied to a parachute. And when they flew over these camps marked PW, they just opened those bomb bays and let it come. Well, the only thing you got to remember, the bomb bay was like the floor of your house. When they opened that up and that thing dropped out, that wasn't attached to a parachute. That just came down, and if you were in the way, you're in trouble.
The captive is now returning to the world he left. What will re-entry be like? Many need time and distance to face family and friends. There is a time of lament, to grieve for lost buddies, time wasted in captivity.
Due to go into New York City, and we went into the harbor, and when you see the Statue of Liberty, it really is something emotional. At least it was for us at that time.
When I arrived, my sister met me at the station, and probably one of the happiest days of my life. And then getting home to see my grandmother, she's the one that raised me and my sister, and she brought us up.
It was a lovely Sunday in June at my mother's home, a lot of company there, and we were enjoying the day, and the phone rang, and it was Cliff. And he said, "I'm here, honey, in Cleveland at Crile Hospital. Come and get me." And all hell broke loose in that house. And all I remember is saying, "Dress the baby, call a cab." I shouted out orders, and the whole household went crazy. And I waited for a very long time for that cab and came out to Crile Hospital with the baby and walked into the lobby that was filled with wounded soldiers, men with bandaged heads, bandaged arms, missing limbs, men in wheelchairs, and everyone reached out for the baby. I waited and waited. I asked the receptionist, I told her who I was, and she said she would send for him. And I stood at the end of what seemed like a very long hall. And then I saw him turn a corner and come walking towards me. And as he got closer and closer, I shook. And he walked with arms swinging, army style, and he got up to me and saw what was greeting him throughout that entire lobby, wall-to-wall wounded men. And he said, "Hi, hon," and he gave me a little peck on the cheek. And I took the baby from one of the men, and I said, "Here's your little daughter." And he said, "She's a beauty." And then he said, "Let's get out of here."
The next real emotional thing was when the closer I got to home on the train, the more excited I got. And when I arrived home, it must have been, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I rang the doorbell, and I could hear my dad saying, "It's him, it's him."
Somehow, my radio operator's parents and girlfriend, who lived in the Pittsburgh area, found that I had come home. and they immediately showed up the day after, one day after I was home. And apparently it was not a very fruitful session with them. I suffered from all sorts of guilt complexes because I was a commanding officer on the airplane, and I lost 7 people, and we were all very, very close. And apparently after that meeting, I wiped everything out of my memory. I can't remember anything. I have since gotten some papers from the National Archives concerning our last flight. And it says in some of those papers that I identified so-and-so's body, and I did this and I did that, and I don't recall it at all.
Many veterans have 2 kinds of battle scars: visible ones and those that do not show. They are inside, hidden, not talked about. They are the secrets of the soul.
My family was fine. I didn't have any trouble there, but it was friends and relatives, and my family is ethnic German. My mother and father were born here. My grandparents were born in Germany. So a lot of the relatives, some of the people asked me, well, did you visit Aunt so-and-so and Aunt so-and-so over there? And I said, and they start with that, well, I just gave it up.
I did have nightmares that awakened me, and of course frightened the heck out of my wife. And I had some experiences that were really not very nice. For example, they brought my ordnance gunner's body back home. And he was about, the parents had something like 10 kids. He was one of 10. And I was invited to a high mass for him. He lived in the Philadelphia area, which was only several hours from New York. And I felt I should go to this high mass. Now, during that time, in church, the Catholic priest gave the service in Latin. And intermingled in the service, he would mention my name, Lieutenant Saul Weiss. And because of my guilt complex, I said, what's he saying about me? I thought everything he's saying is derogatory. Actually, he was praising me.
I got home, and like everybody else, I just wanted to stay on the front porch and not even move.
When I seen the American flag, it said I was home.
That most prisoners of war were afraid when we got back that people would think that we were cowards, that we had a yellow streak up our back. And if people analyze it, they have to realize that, you know, when you're down in the enemy country and you don't know where you're at and someone's holding a gun on you, you don't have too much choice.
With VE and VJ Day, the world caught its breath and made up for lost time. All prisoners of war become brothers, tested in combat, challenged in captivity, and solidified by their will to endure. Their battle to survive is an affirmation of their individual and collective heroism. The hard-won brotherhood of the wire is more than a victory of endurance. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a courage that speaks to all generations of Americans.
Oh It's a family tradition, someone always ends up missing. Count for yourself this time. White stones on a green lawn, a flash of light and then it's all gone. From that moment, life takes a turn. Honor in the clouds, honor on the ground. And then there are those days you pray, just make it out. Honor in the clouds, honor deep in the ground. When life turns to legend where it's found. It's a family tradition, someone always comes back different. See for yourself this time. 3 weeks with your eyes closed, you're on nurse and some clean clothes. And you tell her that your battle scars still burn. Honor in the clouds, honor on the ground. And then there are those days you pray, just make it out.